This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Joyce Podcast Network.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hello, Bad Movie Lovers, and welcome back to Bad Movies We Love, where today we are doing things a little differently with a special event for what would have been Marilyn Monroe's 100th birthday on June 1st of 2026. As always, I am your host, Nick Scheist.
The master of this stupid stuff!
I do talk about quite a lot of stupid stuff, and it's great. I love it. But I also enjoy getting to have more serious film conversations as well, and I've gotten to do that on some other podcasts recently. In fact, you can hear me talking about John Carpenter's They Live with my friend Felicia Moroni on the latest episode of her podcast, Seeing Faces in Movies, and you'll hear me on an upcoming episode of the Canon podcast with Raph from Screen Age Wasteland, and we're going to be talking about A Clockwork Orange. So when the opportunity came along to talk about a decidedly not stupid movie here on this show, I jumped at it. If you listen to the show, you'll know it's not like some other bad movie podcasts that just like to punch down. Here we have real, engaged, intellectual conversations about movies that happen to be bad, and we have a lot of fun along the way. All that to say, I was joined by movie lover, photographer, and recreational Marilyn Monroe historian, Michelle MacBride, to talk about Andrew Dominik's Blonde from 2022 and what that movie means in the context of the life and legacy of Marilyn Monroe. Michelle, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on for this sort of like impromptu special I've yet to title appropriately, but thanks for being here.
No, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. We're going to be talking about Blonde, which is Andrew Dominik's film from 2022. But also in the process of that, we're going to be talking about Marilyn Monroe in general, because for the people that are listening to this, it is her 100th, or what would have been her 100th birthday. And so we wanted to do something where we could sort of both celebrate her life and her legacy and talk about some of those things, and then also use that as a prism to examine this particular film, which is incredibly divisive and is hated and loathed by many people as like an exploitative piece of trash. And it is also celebrated by many other people as this sort of masterpiece of like ethereal biography, but also like it's based on fiction. And we'll get into some of that. But I want to know, like, where sort of does your fascination with Marilyn Monroe begin, and how does that sort of factor into the equation?
Into me choosing or enjoying this film. Yeah. Well, my mom is a really big Marilyn Monroe fan. And so and since she was a little girl, so I very much grew up with, memorabilia in the house, her movies playing. Every time there was a new biopic made for TV series or a movie or documentary, we all, her and I would watch it. But then also having so many books in the house. My mom was a avid collector of her biographies, of photography books. So not only just growing up with her movies, but the image of Marilyn was just always so fascinating to me. And it's choosing this film, it's easy to say it's, a painstakingly perfect recreation of so many of these images and these movies that I grew up with, but it also just taps into a side of her that is rarely seen. And I've seen every biopic, every made-for-TV, series, like every movie, and they just don't quite get it right. And after watching My Week with Marilyn, I was like, this is it. But then another project comes out and you see another aspect, another side of her. So I think that I'm just intrigued with who she really was. And that's kind of what I think keeps her legacy alive, is this, the mystery of who this woman is and what she's left behind. And there's a lot of documentation, a lot of images. So yeah, I guess my mom.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, all of us sort of get those kind of things from our mothers. And,
Yeah.
we're 64 years past her passing. And in those 64 years, like you said, there's been a multitude of books, biographies, miniseries, documentaries. I don't know if there is a public figure who has been more thoroughly and categorically iconized than Marilyn Monroe. And I think what's fascinating and what we'll sort of also be talking about in the discussion of the film itself is that, like, this was happening while she was alive. And now that she's been gone for decades, there is still no shortage of fascination with her as this icon. And it's kind of like the pendulum swings in both directions, where not knowing anything about her and sort of only knowing her screen legacy is a fantasy. And then beginning to learn about who she was and why she made the choices that she did and some of her personal life, and then also mixing in like all of the sort of like tabloid nature of her personal life and her personal relationships. Like, those two halves are kind of in conflict with one another, or at least it seems like they have been. And I think that's one of the reasons that Blonde rubs people the wrong way, is because it directly addresses the conflict. It's not really about her being an icon. It's not even necessarily about her being Norma Jeane. It's really about sort of like that conflict that Norma has with Marilyn, and this tug of war for like, who is the person that she is, and not only who is that person, but like what both of those people mean to all of the like the men and the public in her life that are sort of like clawing and pulling at her. And it's like, when they're doing all this clawing and pulling, what are they actually taking away? Are they ripping parts of Marilyn away? Is it stuff that's being stripped from Norma and her autonomy and her agency that's getting taken away? So these are all like really kind of fascinating elements of her story. And like, if you're a big fan of hers and you sort of understand the conflict, I can sort of rationalize and understand not wanting to see yet another film talking about the sort of troubles of her personal life. But for you, who grew up with like seeing a lot of this, who's seen all of the different iterations of looks at her life, both through sort of like a biographical perspective, an outsider's perspective, how does this film sort of stack into all of those other things? So I know when we had talked about it, I think you had mentioned it to me as like the best of the fictionalized Marilyn Monroe movies. And like, I don't actually know if that's true because I haven't seen any of them.
Yeah, I think first off, just I do like films that challenge me. And I also have a love-hate relationship with biopics. I've seen a lot, and I will probably see most of them. I mean, for me, even if I don't love them, I still watch them in hopes that, oh, maybe we can know what it feels like, not just the chronological sequence of events. And I think that's what most biopics do. You kind of end up with like, oh, you left knowing the facts of a person's life and what they did, but not necessarily what it felt like to be them. And that's something you kind of don't want to admit to yourself when you're watching a Marilyn Monroe biopic, because her life is so scary, but it is so glamorous and it is so fast paced, and it changed, and she created this life for herself. So all my favorite biopics are kind of these creative nonfiction reimaginings. They are a little esoteric. Sometimes they're hard for people to get behind because they're not based off facts. They're based off emotional truth. And that's different for everyone in your relationship, I think, with Marilyn. So yeah, I to bring up like Todd Haynes, I think Todd Haynes can do no wrong in terms of like biopics, the Karen Carpenter story, Velvet Goldmine, I'm Not There. I mean, with I'm Not There, you're like splitting Bob Dylan into like several different, fictional characters because he dodged definition and constantly reinvented himself. And instead of just being like, I'm going to show a guy going through changes, he wanted to display that. And I mean, and that's art. I mean, I don't think we want to watch a biopic that just kind of goes through what you can read on a Wikipedia page. We want something a little more poetic than that. And Blonde does something, Blonde does something similar with Marilyn that Todd Haynes does with even like David Bowie and Velvet Goldmine, whether it's right on its interpretation. Again, everyone has that different. It's asking not just what happened to her, but what it felt like to become her and to have that transformation and that momentum and kind of turning on the faucet and not being able to turn it off. And I think that's what kind of going back to what you said, there's a lot of things that's dealing with, being the victim, being used, narcissistic men and people in her life, but also like she is an accomplice. She is signing up for this. She did create Marilyn. I think that ran away from her. Obviously she lost control of that, but it's just, I forgot the question now, but yeah.
Well, just like if somebody has like very little knowledge of Marilyn Monroe, like myself, going into this movie, does that sort of position me to be more receptive to it or less receptive to it?
Okay, yeah. I think the more you know about Marilyn and you're coming into it thinking this is a standard biopic, you are going to be so disappointed. You're going to hate it. I think that's what I heard across the board with numerous like podcasts and YouTube reviews when this movie came out in 2022, which was interesting to look at now, years later. But yeah, I think the less you know, the more you are going to like it. I think that is a fair assessment, to be honest. But I know so much about her and I still really, really love it. So there's an argument for both. But yeah, I would say that.
So either be a big enough fan that all this stuff makes sense or don't know anything. So you have a blank slate. But if you're in the middle, which most people are,
yes,
you're probably not going to enjoy the movie, which is how we end up talking about it on Bad Movies We Love. And on that note, I'm going to do the tail of the tape now. Just get that out of the way. This has an IMDb score of 5.4, which is not too bad. It's got a Metascore of 50, a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 42, an audience score of 36%, a Letterboxd score of 2.1, and for some reason I couldn't find a Google user score, so whatever. Add all those up, divide them, level it. We get a Bad Movies We Love total of 44.8 out of 100. So I mean, like, decidedly low. Like, this isn't one that's threatening universally accepted good movie territory. This is one that is decidedly squarely in the bad movie territory. And I think it's fascinating to me because let's say this is not a movie about Marilyn Monroe and you take that character out of it and you're just like, hey, this is not based on this book. It is not about this person. It is just this movie exactly the same. I feel like it's probably a lot more forgiving in terms of like how people receive it, because I think it's competently made very clearly. Like Nick Cave and Warren Ellis on the score, like, yes, please, always. It looks good. It does some very visually interesting things, both in terms of like how it uses the camera to sort of like morph the background to like shape her perspective. It goes in and out of black and white and color. The aspect ratio changes a lot throughout the course of the film. There's some very clever in-camera production technique stuff, like when she's on the airplane and sort of like we see the interior cabin of the plane and they come up and tap her on the shoulder, and then it's like she gets up and she's walking into like this open theater. Like there's some very clever like filmmaking work that is at play throughout the course of the movie. So I think from like a film fan perspective, there is a lot to appreciate, at least for someone like me who really sort of geeks out on like how some things are achieved in movies. I think the biggest rub for the film comes down to maybe like this being an exploitation film that's also talking about how the central character was exploited and sort of and like it's cannibalistic maybe in that way, in that even in examining how she was exploited during her life, it is still an exploitative process. And I think, I mean, at the very least, it's a fascinating exercise to me because, like, yes, I think you can see elements of this film and say it's exploitative. But when I saw that it was NC-17, I was expecting significantly worse.
Me too.
Significantly worse. I know Netflix like pushed to get the rating down, and both Andrew Dominik and Armas were surprised, you know, that she's like, we had to be willing to go to certain places, but we didn't view the thing that we did as this NC-17 project.
Yeah.
Because like other than I'm thinking of a couple of scenes of like sexual violence. In terms like it's like, okay, you're making me sort of experience it in a way, and yes, of course, that is an uncomfortable and horrible thing to have to watch, and the whole movie is very sort of, I don't know, unpleasant to watch, right? And I think that is the point. You're not supposed to really be like, oh my god, it's so fun to like hang out with Marilyn Monroe in this like stylized Hollywood that really behind the scenes is kind of just eating her alive. So that aspect of it, of like, how do you treat the, not necessarily the ghost, but the memory of this person who already lived through all this stuff, I think is sort of like mileage will vary kind of question, because some people just don't want to see that. And if it really is like, hey, I'm going in to watch this like sort of Hollywood gloss version of a Marilyn Monroe biopic, like that is not this movie at all. And I can understand people being like completely put off by it, but you had mentioned sort of like the appreciation of the things that challenge you. And I feel that this film is very challenging.
Yeah.
On a number of fronts. And as the resident Marilyn Monroe like expert here, I'm curious, what do you think is like the most contentious bit of the element of her life that we see like being addressed in the film?
I think the film addresses both things here. Like a person who wants to act, wants to work on this skill, takes it seriously, but then also someone who's in industry that is not doing that for her. And so I think what is so difficult for people is we see Marilyn as someone in charge of her career. She's the first woman to be co-owner of a production company with her and Milton Green. They went on to do a few films. Like that's really big. That's not addressed in the movie because again, there's agency that she's attempting, but it seems to be kind of, I don't want to say snuffed out, but just put out. Even during an audition, she starts referencing Dostoevsky and they're like, oh yeah, you read that? Sure. And I don't think that's ever been, like her intellectual on that level has never been even explored in any type of like, I mean, I think they maybe did that with the Blonde TV series in 2001, but I rewatched that a few days ago, and it's not even believable. She's in a very revealing dress for the audition. She's not taken seriously. I think that's another thing of like the wardrobe choices, and when we see casual Marilyn, intellectual, like Marilyn, Norma, I guess you would say. But I think, yeah, it's the biggest thing here is that, you know, did Marilyn earn her career, or was it because she was sexy, because she's a woman? I think that sort of, you know, I think, again, the film sort of plays with both, in that she is a victim of the circumstances of the time that she was in and the industry that she's in, but also doing her best to have agency to choose specific things in her life, even if those choices ended up hurting her in the end because of people or contracts. So I think, yeah, for people to see her being used by people in a way, but also make choices is just difficult. But that's a human being. I think that is a well-rounded picture of a person, of that we are in control of our life. There is free will, but we're also confined to certain aspects of what we create for ourselves, our traumas, or the industries that we choose to be in, right? I mean, I'm a woman. I could model. I could dye my hair blonde. I could change my name. I could pose nude, but I choose not to, right? So we do have choices. And I think that's really hard for people to accept, that Marilyn may have put herself in situations that hurt her despite being hurt in the past. But I think hurt people do that. That's very common for people who come from trauma. So
Yeah. And it's also like, it sort of teeters, I think, into what a lot of people would say is like victim blaming, right? In that
okay, yeah,
she kind of like she is a victim of the studio system. I mean, like you hear her negotiating the contract on the phone. I mean, that actually leads her in real life to falling out with the studio, taking a break, then forming her own production company as a result. So like having the agency to like push back for more money, to like understand her worth, to understand like as she's the biggest box office star, or she had the highest grossing movie of the year before, or something like that.
yeah.
And so to recognize the value there. But yeah, I think that sort of that thin line between she created the persona to achieve this thing that she wanted, and she, I don't think, understood the appetite for that persona once, like you said, the faucet was running. Like she couldn't turn the faucet off, and everybody wanted to drink from the faucet. And so she couldn't have anticipated that. And I don't think it is fair to her to say like, oh, she is to blame then for wanting to sort of create this persona for herself and actually keep a healthy work-life balance by being like, this is my public persona that I work under, and like this is who I actually am. I think that's a very like fair and fairly smart thing to do. I don't use my real last name when I record and release this show. I get it. And I don't have to deal with like a tenth of the stuff that she had to deal with.
Yeah.
So yeah, the movie does challenge on, I think, probably too many levels, especially to be one and done with it. I think there's a reason that it's 2 hours and 47 minutes, because it has to be fairly comprehensive for it to even stand a chance, because otherwise it's like, oh, it's just a lazy sort of incomplete biopic. We've already had a bunch of these before. What are you doing other than maybe shooting it in black and white, or some of the stylistic choices? Like it would also sort of be like, what is the point of this? And I think, given that it was Dominik's like passion project for a long time before it got made. The original book by Joyce Carol Oates is written in 2000. That miniseries you referenced is 2001. And so it's still 20 years later before this movie gets made. But I want to sort of go to the film file here quickly, since I mentioned Andrew Dominik. He, of course, directed this film, also adapted the screenplay. Like I said, it's based on the book by Joyce Carol Oates. Fictionalized version of the biography of Marilyn Monroe. So already working from sort of like a complicated starting block, starring Ana de Armas, Lily Fisher, Julianne Nicholson, and also featuring Bobby Cannavale, Xavier Samuel, Evan Williams, not the Jack Daniels booze knockoff, Vanessa, Lemonides, and Adrien Brody. Of course, composed and scored by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, cinematography by Chase Irvin, edited by Adam Robinson, with production design by Florencia Martin, art direction by Peter Andrus, set direction by Aaron Feit, and costumes by Jennifer Johnson. So a very good team comes together to work on this project. I think 2010 was around the time that like this started sort of like a film adaptation development cycle. And I don't know how much stuff came out between 2001 and 2022 on Marilyn. I'm sure there's still books. I'm sure there's still TV series because this poor woman still cannot rest. I mean, she's still used in plenty of advertising at this point. Like her likeness is still all over the place. It's kind of like she's like a human, like Betty Boop to some degree. Like she's transcended into the place where she is just like this Hollywood icon. And like go down Hollywood Boulevard, stop in some of those shops. I'm sure you'll find Marilyn Monroe stuff, guaranteed.
Yeah, you go to like fair festivals and there's like tattooed Marilyns that you can win and stuff. It's just, wow. Which is just so interesting because, this man spends whatever, like 14 years or 12 years making this movie based off an obviously fictionalized account of her, still does her justice in a lot of ways in terms of, again, agency, her intelligence, her talent, her drive, and people still are just like as if we forgot that there's all this other, this media, and also people selling just recently her X-rays for her chest and her pelvis are going up for auction in just a few days, and I think that's pretty exploitative or exploitive. And so I do question why when it comes to someone's artistic vision of someone and not in really in a I don't think that they're hurting Marilyn and showing her being a vulnerable person in this industry, but yet it just seems like really people just honed in on everything that was wrong with this movie and kind of seemed to forget the almost injustices that occurred to her and still do with like just to make money, not to make art, not to say a message, not to do it, just to make money. And I'm like, that's more blasphemy than I think this film does. But it's just me.
I mean, if the goal of this was to just make money, you would have tried to release it in theaters. But I mean, that wasn't the case here. This goes to Netflix. I highly doubt Netflix saw a massive spike in subscriptions when this movie was announced. If you show me the graph, I'm sure maybe there's a little bump, but I don't think this is driving subscriptions. So this being floated as some sort of like cash grab, I think is just false and reactionary. But also, like when you watch the movie, like it's not a cash grab movie. Like this isn't, like, no offense, it's not Bohemian Rhapsody, which I think is a very glossy Hollywood production version of a biopic of a very troubled character that doesn't really like spend a ton of time getting into the troubles of that character. And I think the movie still treats Marilyn with a lot of respect, and it doesn't necessarily paint her in a negative light, in my opinion. I feel like the stuff that's happening in the movie, of course, is a very sort of bad set of circumstances, and watching these things happen to her and sort of watching her sort of progressively lose control and watching the people that she attaches herself to want to take control from her, like it's all sort of like predatory and disgusting. And I can understand you watching it and feeling uncomfortable, because I did.
Yeah.
But also, like, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable because of it. And so I feel like the intent of the film is actually like pointing you in the direction that like you're supposed to be going. Like you're supposed to not feel great about all of these things. This isn't a moment to just look back and be like, oh man, wasn't she beautiful and such a great actress and she had great style and all of those things. And like all of those things are still true and you still do see all of that.
Yeah.
But it's not like a stroll down memory lane for nostalgia's sake. And so for those reasons, I don't think it is this sort of like exploitive cash grab. But let me set the table on some of the production notes. So this, like we said, it went on for over a decade in development. But Dominik had repeatedly emphasized that it's intended as a work of fiction rather than a traditional biopic. And Naomi Watts was originally cast as Marilyn when development started in 2010, but many, many years of delays and financing issues stalled that version of the production. Brad Pitt and Plan B Entertainment later joined in, and Jessica Chastain then briefly replaced Watts before the role ultimately went away as well. The project ends up gaining momentum when Netflix signs on to distribute the film in 2016. They're at the point where they are really pushing sort of legacy films, wanting to get into Oscar contention and conversations and become a major player at the sort of studio level. So after many, many years of development, Ana de Armas was cast as Marilyn in 2019, and then she spends a year working with a dialect coach and extensively studying Marilyn's life and career to prepare for this movie. And the film's ensemble cast also, as we said, includes Oscar winners like Adrien Brody. There's Bobby Canavale, very, very entertaining guy. Not in this movie, though. And Julianne Nicholson, who may have been nominated for an Oscar recently, if I recall. Or she had a role that was like sort of in the conversation, but I don't want to get bogged down there. But production begins in 2019, and I think the first day of principal photography is actually on the day of her death, the anniversary of her death on August 4th in 2019. And they shoot for almost 2 years, concludes in 2021 following some pandemic delays. Andrew Dominik, as we said, uses this very highly stylized visual approach, mixes black and white and color, changes aspect ratios, recreates even famous moments. Certain scenes from certain movies, in fact, are recreated in this with archival footage. So a very sort of experimental movie in a lot of ways. But Blonde has its world premiere at the 79th Venice International Film Festival on September 8th of 22, followed by a screening at the 48th Deauville American Film Festival. It gets its limited theatrical run in New York, starting on September 16th and other locations on the 23rd, and then eventually lands home on Netflix 2 weeks later on September 28th, 2022. So it did exactly what it had to do to be able to like get into Oscar contention, right? It has to have a theatrical release that's in part, I mean, this isn't like a super Oscar baity movie in the way that a lot of conventional biopics are, but it seems like if you make a biopic about a historical figure, you're kind of already on the short list if you get close. And lo and behold, Anna does end up getting nominated for an Oscar for this. The movie itself, though, ends up going on to be nominated 8 times at the Raspberries or the Razzies.
Yeah.
It wins Worst Picture and Worst Screenplay. So I think it was the first movie at the time to be nominated at the Razzies for Worst Picture and then also be nominated for an Oscar at the same time. But yeah, she picks up Golden Globe, BAFTA, SAG, and Oscar noms for Best Actress for this. So let's talk about Anna specifically a little bit in this, because I feel like she's good. She goes through a lot in the film, a lot is required of her. I mean, she's topless. I'm not gonna like, given that the movie is so long, I don't really feel like it's that much screen time of her being topless, but
No.
it does happen a lot throughout the movie. Like there is a plot point too of these photos that get leaked of when, she was photographed nude sort of before really becoming famous. So you have this like overt kind of, on the one hand, like the sexualization of Marilyn Monroe, and like Ana de Armas is a good-looking woman. She's been nude in several films before, and I think after this as well. So you have that on the one hand, and then also sort of like the exploitative nature of her being in those situations, because some of it is very casual, and then some of it is not. Like sometimes she's at home, she's laying in bed, topless. Like, okay, that makes sense. And then sometimes Bobby Cannavale's walking in the room and smacking her in the face, topless. And so you're kind of like, once again, like caught between the sort of like reality of Norma Jeane and the existence of Marilyn, and like where those two things clash. And so I think, given that there has been many portrayals of Marilyn to this point in her legacy, how do you feel that Anna did with this?
I think she like runs circles around anyone who's ever attempted to play Marilyn. Yeah, and in terms of nudity, I mean, the 1994 Miramax film with Ashley Judd and God, I'm drawing a blank, but there's two actresses. She's in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, but there are two actresses who,
Mira?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly, plays Marilyn, and the very opening scene is like, I guess, a dream that Marilyn had where she goes into church and she's naked, but they show that in the movie. The first thing is like Ashley Judd, am I thinking Ashley? Yeah. Walks in completely just naked. I mean, bush, everything, naked, walking into a church. So, I mean, that's pretty shocking in terms of the first scene that you see in that. And I mean, I guess there's enough time where we can, but also for the Marilyn character, I mean, the voice is a really big deal for me. I think that everyone just tries to do the voice that she has in her films and doesn't actually pay attention to this range that she had depending on the movie, the era, the acting coach that she had, working with dialect coaching, and also just the situation. I mean, there are times you hear Marilyn, it doesn't even sound like her voice because it's so deep. It's not, there's, the baby is gone. There's no head voice. It's just, so I think with Anna, she did a really good job in that you can't quite nail her voice anyway. So kind of, it's more of the way that she approaches the words and how she speaks them that I think is actually what wins me over. And I mean, in preparing for this, I watched every single biopic and TV, like not fully, but just a little bit of it, just to remind myself of like, was it good? Did they do it well? Did they? And it's just, you just know it when you see it. You're channeling a woman of an exceptional beauty, of both, strength, vulnerability. I mean, and someone you just don't want to look away from. And that's incredibly difficult, but I cannot stop looking at her and watching her. She's just amazing. And she does change her voice. It shifts throughout the whole film. There's different times where, I mean, obviously she still has her accent, but it did not at all take me out of it. And it never did, even from the first time I watched it. So I get taken out by this breathy one note that every other project has done. Not to mention they again put her in sexier clothing and scenes to make it more like Marilyn versus like who could she have been when she's not dressed like this. And if you've seen a lot of photos like I have, you do see there's a very simple, no jewelry style of her that is just interesting. So I mean, I know that has to do a lot with costuming, but to go back to Anna, it's just, yes, she's crying a lot. She's very fragile, but she plays that in a very earnest and respectful way where everything else I've watched feels just like a joke. Just like, yeah, I don't know. I hate to say that, but.
Well, I mean, I think I could sort of at least rationalize that there is kind of like a surface level fascination with Marilyn, where if you don't have a full year of like, hey, we're going to go to sort of speech pattern training, dialect training, she underwent an extensive amount of practice in order to, I think, breathe the kind of life into the character that, like you said, you haven't seen before, sort of like at a very like fundamental level. And it's funny you bring up the costumes, because obviously she wears a lot of like really gorgeous dresses and stuff in this, and the movie takes place in 40s and 50s, a little bit of the 60s technically, so you get to see a lot of like really cool fashion in general. But I think like the outfit that I would pick from the movie that is like the outfit is just like the plaid pants and the black turtleneck.
Mhm.
Or I'm not sure if it's a turtleneck, but it's like a crew
It's a
neck or
turtle.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So like that is, I think, the look that I think defines her specifically in the film, because that is her as Norma, right? I mean, like, yes, she's in character as Marilyn, but she's not there to like, show off her chest and do all these things that Marilyn very clearly gets sort of pigeonholed into throughout a lot of her career. Like, as I was watching some of the movies to prepare for this, I'm like, oh, she's always wearing some dress that is sort of like cut to like have her boobs on full display. And it's why she becomes sort of the kind of icon that she does for that era of Hollywood. And so to see that, like, Anna's going to wear this like black turtleneck, like very sensible, very reasonable attire to go and do some of this stuff. And it's a lot of like when she's in her acting class too, which I found interesting, because it strips away all of the bells and whistles, and is like, at her core, she's kind of like a theater kid that just wants to like do the work. And you hear her talk about the way that she wants to take on certain roles in some of the dialogue in the film. And I think it's when she's talking to Canavale at the table on their first date, and she's talking about doing stage work and the difference between doing something on screen and sort of having
Mhm.
that presented after several takes and getting chopped up and, put up there, but to
Yeah.
then listen to someone who's like sort of technically playing Marilyn Monroe too, like on a deeper level, right? Because like she's playing Norma, who's playing Marilyn, and so
Yeah.
at the table she's playing Norma, who's playing Marilyn, and then
Yeah.
Marilyn is expressing this idea of like wanting to inhabit somebody in a stage world so that she could really flesh that out over a longer period of time. And so like hearing that kind of desire echoed also reminds me that there's another scene at a dinner table where she's talking to Adrien Brody, is Arthur Miller,
Mhm.
and she's kind of breaking down his characterization of his the character that he wrote for his play. And he's like very offended at first that like there's no way you could have possibly sort of like taken these notes on your own,
Yeah.
somebody told you about this. And I was reading some friends and stuff who had written reviews about this, and like that scene in particular was like honed in on as this example of the movie like ripping away Norma's agency. And I'm like, I
How
don't
so?
know, like, yeah, like it's a very long review, so I'm not going to read the whole
Oh,
thing again, but I can send it to you afterwards. But I
yeah.
think
No, I'd love to read it.
the gist of it is basically that um it's not presenting her as like this intelligent person, but rather when it does sort of showcase that for a second, it's immediately taken from her and then used as like I think what was described as a meet cute for her and Arthur. And I was like,
Oh,
it's an
okay.
interesting way to look at it, because like on the one
Mhm.
hand, like, yes, it is the thing that sort of sparks their romance, but like I feel like a thorough sort of examination, or like a thorough autopsy of what is happening in that scene, is actually the opposite of that, in that there is a very intelligent, very decided woman sitting across the table from somebody who has like these very sort of narrow ideas about who his character is and why she is the way that she is. And through something that comes to Norma very naturally in saying that, like, yeah, this character that you're describing would have been illiterate in this time frame, so that's why she doesn't understand. And she kind of throws it away of like, oh, I've already like reached into this character and figured out all of these things and why I want to play the character in a certain way and what things speak to me about the character. And then you have Arthur, who's like, wow, I'm so stupid. I didn't even like realize that this story of this woman that I've written this love story about, like I didn't even realize this thing. And I think the sort of like the meet cute aspect of it is a little bit reductive because that is the point of the scene, in that it's not really like a meet cute and this story of their romance. It's this acceptance from Arthur that like, oh, this person sitting across the table from me actually like has more to offer than Marilyn Monroe. Like, or his perception of Marilyn Monroe was like, he was very sort of off put by her even being in the audition in the first place. He didn't think she was, you're not my Maddie or whatever the character's name was, right? Like he goes ahead and says that. And so like in that moment, like he realizes that she is more and then still consumes it. And so I think that really is the point, in that in all of these situations where these men that like come into her life where they're kind of supposed to be like her partner, right? Like these are the husbands of hers. They're supposed to be more to her than just the next person wanting to consume her. And then obviously that trickles out over time and things kind of look okay for a while. And then she ends up in his study and he can see that he's like, you know, breaking a promise to her and writing this story of like meeting her and once again just like consuming and exploiting her. And so I think that's like, it's a longer through line than the scene at the table because you have to get all the way to the point of it happening yet again.
Yeah, I think there's so much. I mean, this is a very dreamlike, surreal stuff, you know, full of symbolism. And so even when he comes out and he like it's like not my Magda, and he walks out and he sees this big, tall, you know, it's like he can't escape her. I think it's a symbol for just like, this woman is going to be in your life. And then cutting to this scene that we know from, I think it's Ed Bergish. It's just some photos that he took of her. She, you know, Arthur's not there in those photos. They're very well known, but they're adding it because they just want to show how transformative those years were. The New York years, kind of coined the happy years of Marilyn, where she was finally honing in on her craft. She did meet someone who intellectually stimulated her and also supported her and saw her for who she finally was, which was a good actress. And so I think that scene, I never saw it as a meet cute. I saw it as this, again, just kind of a symbol for the way that he first saw her and how he came to learn about her, and seeing like, oh, this isn't just, the dumb blonde. I mean, I think if you're a writer and someone gives you insight into something you've written, that's very powerful. I mean, or if you're a painter or an artist or a director of any kind, and someone gives you insight into your own self that you subconsciously didn't even realize about. I mean, I love that scene. I think it gives a service to her and to who she really was. And there's moments like that in the audition. And times where she's like, anytime when she's with Strasberg is, you know, I love that scene.
Well, I feel like it sort of speaks to like this larger thing that's happening in the movie, where it's sort of like Marilyn's clearly our protagonist. She's the main character of the film. Like, it's, you know, she's not the titular role, but basically same difference.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a lot of the sort of structure of the movie is happening to her. And so I can understand that when you see that scene and it's like, oh, she establishes like this, she's having this conversation where she's kind of like blows his expectations away. She establishes herself as a very sort of smart, intellectually curious person who's done this like emotional excavation of a character that she's studying, presents it to the writer, and then like in his eyes, he's just sort of like, the cartoon where it's like hearts in his eyes and he's just
That's true.
love struck.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, yeah, I see that. But again, like that is the point of the scene, to like, even when she meets somebody that is actually intellectually stimulating for her and can kind of like see her on that level, he still is just like starry eyed. And yeah, that is ultimately, I think, my takeaway from how that stuff plays out. But to sort of give her like a vehicle to be like, oh yeah, like the same thing with the Dostoevsky's thing, where she's like, hey, I'm pointing out like this stuff and like I'm showing that I am smart and capable, and then immediately getting torn down, and that kind of being a recurring theme throughout the movie. It's like, yes, it sucks to see it, but it probably sucked a lot more to live it. And like the movie is trying to make us experience what it was like to have lived it for her.
It's funny that you say that, because I was listening to a podcast where a few people were discussing it, and one woman was just like, it's just so sad. I just wanted it to be over. And I'm like, that's, Dancer in the Dark is sad and trauma and full of trauma. Let's just like not. Why doesn't Bjork just not be in Dancer in the Dark? Because it's kind of a bummer. Like by the end of it, it's not really resolved, and I'm still sad. Like, okay, like sorry. This is yeah.
The only way out is through, unfortunately. And
yes.
Yeah, it's gonna make people uncomfortable, and it made a lot of people uncomfortable, which is how it ended up getting kicked around the gutters long enough for the last couple of years to end up on this show. But let's lighten things up briefly and do the synopsis haiku.
Okay. Do we both have one?
I wrote one.
Okay,
I'll go first. Okay. Her star shone in lux, caged, mirrored, and exploited. Her nightmare made flesh.
Oh my god, mine is so much shorter than that. Was it supposed to be longer?
No, it's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. I think I counted right.
Okay. I just wrote, cameras kneel as if worship and violence are the same motion. That was my short. Okay.
That's
I did that.
And I think it wasn't necessarily difficult to sort of come up with a haiku for it. It was just like, it's not going to be necessarily a fun, jaunty one, because I do feel like the whole movie is kind of a nightmare. And it's as if, from the time that she becomes famous to the time that she dies, like she's kind of just like stuck in this perpetual nightmare, no matter who her partner is, no matter what studio she's working with, no matter what project she's on. There's like a inescapable consumption that is always there, and she's caught between like, hey, I want to work, like I enjoy acting and I want to do this, but also like I am insanely famous and desired. And then also all the tabloid stuff, the high profile relationships. I mean, like the scene with JFK in this is horrendous. And that actor whose name escapes me right now, he's played JFK like 4 times. So they're like, just get the JFK guy in here.
Casper Phillipson is his name. And he's been.
It's like my understanding of her relationship with JFK was always sort of like the birthday song, right? And the popping out of the cake or something like that.
No, they definitely had a relationship. No, that is true. They definitely fucked.
Yeah, and then are we to understand that in that scene where she's being brought in by Secret Service, that's Jackie on the couch, like just sobbing? Okay.
No, those are just
there's just a woman with her head down, just like.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Yeah. I think when I watched that after the most recent time, obviously it's horrifying to think of someone getting like put on a plane and then sent to just have, but interestingly enough, I mean, things like that did occur even at that time period. I mean, even the week before Marilyn passed, Frank Sinatra was like, "You need to come stay with me up at my hotel lodge getaway in Lake Tahoe for a little bit," and like sent a private jet to pick her up. So, I mean, and then he also picked up Peter Lawford that same week, which was JFK's brother in law. So it's like she was around these people and was definitely just like, if someone wanted her, could pick her up very easily. These things are facts. I think it's horrifying to think of someone doing that to her just for sex. But again, this is a nightmare. It's not based off Marilyn's life as much as it kind of encapsulates maybe what it could be like for a lot of women in Hollywood around this time. I think when we haven't touched the abortion aspect, but Marilyn never had abortions, but many women in Hollywood did at the time to save their careers, despite wanting a family. And again, I don't think we talked about this, but in the novel Blonde, they don't actually name the characters. So there's like the playwright, ex-athlete, blonde actress. So I think that it is a little bit in like Velvet Goldmine. There's an amalgamation of these characters to kind of create the sense of a time in a specific industry. With Velvet Goldmine, it's glam rock, it's David Bowie, it's Iggy Pop, it's like all of that. But you know, they're not really saying that, but it's still a pretty good visual representation of glam rock in that time. So I think here it's horrifying to see her getting carried off and then just being put back on a plane. But are we really to think it's so far-fetched? I mean, obviously not for her, but I mean, again, hard to watch. It's a nightmare, but I looked at that as feeling like this is pretty real in terms of just, what it would like. Also the Secret Service being in the room, there's just no care for her privacy, no care. It's just, she's just, and yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's gross.
Yeah.
And as gross as it is, like you have this close up of her performing
Mm-hmm.
on JFK. But her monologue during that is about, like, again, playing this performance, and then zoom out a little bit further, and it's like she's in the theater watching this scene unfold in front of a bunch of other people, and it's kind of like this sort of cyclical version of everything that's happening in her life at the moment, of like always having to be playing the character that somebody else wants her to be. And so I think, like, from an artistic vantage point, like, if you're going to include this, on the one hand, like, yes, it is gross, but like, to then, I think, extrapolate it out and sort of give us a broader understanding of, like, why it's gross and like why she would feel the need to do this in this situation. And I think that is the sort of common thread that, like you mentioned, that a lot of women in the industry had gone through and experienced, in that, like, it's only a few minutes of, like, being in a situation that I don't like in order to have, like, an outcome that will be beneficial or whatever, right? And the pressure of powerful men in those situations, like the producer that rapes her in the beginning. So could potentially be, the trivia says it's Daryl Zanuck, who was
That's
notorious for casting couch practices, and his reported victims include Linda Darnell, Carol Landis, Jean Tierney, Ann Sheridan, Jane Mansfield, and Judy Holliday. So, like you said, like, Marilyn is not just representing, like, Marilyn in this case.
yeah.
Like, she is representing sort of like the era of, like, Hollywood starlet at the time, and the way that the business itself treated these women and exploited them, not just like on the screen and financially, but sexually as well, and kind of like these disposable parts of this larger machine. And I think when you have the Secret Service take her off an airplane, throw her in the back of a cab, give her a ticket home that same night and say, sorry, you're not staying. Rush her into the suite where JFK is like busy on the phone, negotiating whatever.
Yeah.
And forces her to perform on him. And then, they drag her out like from what I understand, it cuts to black, but she comes away like bloody.
Yeah,
so it's like she's physically assaulted on top of being sexually assaulted, ends up in the bathroom, and then is just like freaking out because she's like waking up from being blacked out.
Yeah.
The sort of like disposability of even the biggest, highest profile, like female movie star at the time was still just like, she's nobody. And I think, like, granted, like, it is a very messy and uncomfortable way to get there, but that is like the larger picture.
Something I want to touch on for that scene too, and why it is powerful. It feels kind of like the main, I mean, there's multiple moments in the film where it's like really trying to tell you something, but this is like, I think this is really hitting home, is that when Joyce Carol Oates wrote Blonde, she wrote it from this perspective of Norma already passing, as if there's a soul. Let's just pretend for a moment, that there's a soul that leaves the body, processing her life and looking back. So like, why did I do these? How was Marilyn? Why is Marilyn here? And it's examining, the cost of becoming something that you want to be and how much of yourself you're sacrificing to get there. And is it worth it? And these are not questions that we can kind of ask in the moment, right? These are questions we get to ask if we have the privilege of getting older, right? Which she didn't. So I think if we could ask Marilyn at 70 or 80 about these times, and if she would choose to tell us, honestly, she would be able to tell us what Marilyn was thinking and why she was there. But we can't. So this movie's doing its best to be like, at least giving her some self-reflection of like her life. And I don't think that is really, I mean, I know it's not really present in a lot of material on her. Again, this is an experiment, like the book itself is experimental, exercise of putting yourself in a position that Joyce Carol Oates and even myself would never ever put myself. But what if you did, and what would that mean in terms of just how much control you have, and in that scene, I mean, Norma has no control. Marilyn's taken over. She doesn't even know why she's doing what she's doing. And I think that it's hard for someone who is such a big fan of her, maybe, or you just have so much just like love for her that you just can't imagine someone not understanding that. And again, this is just an exercise. It's not saying this is what Marilyn thought in this time, this is what happened, but just an exercise into what it could possibly feel like for someone to look back on their life and the decisions they made and what they went through. And not just decisions they made, but also the people that they let in and that said that they love them and would take care of them. So yeah, it's just interesting. Yeah.
Did you read Joyce Carol Oates' book?
No, I haven't. No,
okay.
I never have. No. But it
sounds like a fascinating exercise in general as well too, because like, writing about somebody that you're theoretically like a fan of, but also like having to grapple with like a very harsh reality of their existence and like what it means to sort of be a fan and play into the consumption. And then also like, how do you care about the person when caring about the person sort of draws energy away from the fandom side of things, like from the consumption side, is a very difficult thing. And so I'd be curious to read the book, but I want to point out that Marilyn was only 36 when she died. Incredibly young, younger than I am now.
Right.
And she was married, which I don't know if they really got into her marriage to James Doherty.
Not at all.
But she was married to him in 1942 when she was 16.
Yeah.
And then, so divorced at 20, marries Joe DiMaggio at 28. They're married for a year, divorced. marries Arthur Miller a year later at 29. They're married for 5 years, divorced.
Yeah. The longest
So
marriage was.
yeah, but to like be married for the first time at 16 is something I think that reflects back into like a very specific thing in this movie. But before we get to that, I'm going to put a pin in it because I will come back to it, I promise. I think in terms of general consensus for the movie, there's a couple things I wanted to read, and then I wanted to get your take on why you sort of think people view this as a movie that's a 44 out of 100. But the speculation from at least like the what is it, the consensus from critics, or I don't know how they average it out on Rotten Tomatoes, but anyway, it says Ana de Armas' luminous performance makes it difficult to look away, but Blonde can be hard to watch as it teeters between commentating on exploitation and contributing to it. And then the audience consensus is it doesn't matter how well acted or creatively filmed it is. Watching Blonde is a really unpleasant experience.
Okay. I mean,
everything must be a pleasant experience.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I just feel like everyone wanted to see her just like so happy and just like in the cutest little outfits and just like doop, boop, boop, just like bouncing around and just being a little sad, and then ultimately just it's like what life is this? I actually have pulled numerous quotes for this if we have time from people who knew her, and I'd love to kind of paint a picture of what people actually saw in her and describe her. But it's not wrapped up. The mystery isn't solved. The damsel does not get saved. This is not a happy ending in terms of the story.
All right. Well, before we look at the trailer, there's one more that I wanted to read. This was somebody on Letterboxd says, this is Marilyn's personal hell, where she dies and people keep making movies, documentaries, and books about the worst moments of her life over and over again for decades, and we just live in it. And so I feel that is like true, but also like a sort of like harsh understanding. But I feel like the movie itself is like a nightmare, and so it is kind of like, if you look at it through the prism of like the movie represents this personal hell for her, where long after she's dead she's like reliving and having to reconsider like all the worst things that happened to her, and then that is fed back to us as an audience for consumption again. I think it's a very sort of like interesting like artistic puzzle to solve from like a filmmaking perspective, because you're asking some like interesting questions of like, does the appetite for this like sort of thing ever pass? And maybe the answer with this movie is that like, hey, the appetite for it has dwindled, and it's not as strong as it used to be. But I don't know. We'll see in a few years where there's a new Marilyn biopic that's all glossy and there's not all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my week with Marilyn is, I think it tries to show a turbulent side of her life. And that's in 2010. And up until Blonde, I was like, oh my God, Michelle Williams, best Marilyn. I totally nails it. But I just, it was just too, watching it now, I'm just like, it feels just like, again, I keep saying a joke, but it just feels like someone just dressing up and hitting all the notes. And I mean, that's how I felt when you watch films like Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocket Man. It's like, it's just not quite nailing the feeling of, and I'm talking about like when I go through books on her, it's like, if you watch The 7-Year Itch, you're not going to get who Marilyn is. You're going to get that film, Billy Wilder, and like, it's super fun. But you open a book and people are going to be talking about how hard she was on herself, the lack of confidence, her childlike mannerisms, her just this broad like innocence, vulnerability. And like, I think what the film doesn't do well in terms of like depicting her is just that she seems very angry, and that doesn't ever seem to be something that I personally have read about her. So there are things that I definitely am like, I don't love this, but overall it's it's not. One thing I want to say too is with biopics, with like, you have families or foundations or things that are in charge of the image of the person. And with Marilyn, you don't have daughters, sons, mother, all these people kind of being like, no, you can't share this. So there is a little bit of like her life that's a little more open than, let's say, the Michael Jackson biopic, which will probably not go into any dark matter in terms of his.
Yeah. I mean, there's a part 2 I heard, but
they're not going to go into any of the.
No, he's the king of pop.
I know, but it's the truth. The truth is, he went into like courtrooms for these things, and But anyway, I think that's also something to note too. Is that there's less of people like involved in the control and limiting like how she is viewed and her story. So it's a little kind of more up in the air, I think, or just available. I don't know how to say that.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the trailer here, because the trailer's got at least 250,000 thumbs ups. So at least people like the trailer.
The trailer is good.
Yes, we see this?
Yep.
Okay.
Miss Monroe, it's time.
On the hand.
How'd you get your start?
Maybe.
What start?
In movies.
White continental. But diamonds are a girl's
Kind of an
best
important
friend.
question that we don't really see. Oh, here, they do.
I guess I was discovered.
Telling us right up front.
Men broke home as girls,
I know you're supposed to get used to it,
and we all lose our charms in the end.
but I just can't.
Square cut or pear shaped, these
I've played
don't lose
Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe. I can't face doing another scene with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn doesn't exist. When I come out of my dressing room, I'm Norma Jeane. I'm still her when the camera's rolling. Marilyn Monroe only exists on the screen.
That's a good trailer.
Yeah.
Did that stop screen sharing?
Yeah, it did. We're back.
Yeah, I think that particular conversation is important because it sort of views Marilyn as sort of like a means to an ends, right? Like Marilyn only exists to the audience that consumes her, because it's like she's still herself doing the role, but when she's marketed to us, it's Marilyn. So she exists as like sort of only a creation of marketing. And I find that to be sort of like a very fascinating like career to be beholden to, because like, would she have had, like, people definitely knew that she was Norma, not everybody, like not, mass audiences and stuff, but had she come out and be like, I don't want to work under the name Marilyn Monroe anymore, I'm sure the marketing departments of a lot of those studios she had contracts with would not be fans. But she did start her own production company at one point, and I'm just curious, like, if there was like a trajectory for her to just be Norma Jeane and leave kind of this celebrity thing that Marilyn represented behind.
Yeah, I'm curious. I think in reading a lot about her and there's also this documentary that goes into all these photographers who knew her and photographed her and interviews them. And I do not think that Marilyn did seem happiest when she was acting, creating, like, so I would argue that she would probably never be able to pull away from that aspect, even though, you know, in reading, she wanted a family, she wanted to settle down. I think that there was, you know, when you are cut off from love and admiration and being told that you're beautiful for so long, I mean, talking about your whole childhood, your whole young teen years, you want that so badly. And it almost feels like in creating Marilyn, it was a way for her to not just like survive, but also get that channel love and admiration. So yeah, I think it's possible to create something that gives you what you need, but also consumes you. And yeah, I think something to note too is that, like, you can be in a movie when you're 10 and still have celebrity affect you later on in your life. It doesn't mean that, you know, so something that Shelley Winters said about her was that, you know, and about actresses in general, you sign away when you're young these contracts and you set yourself up in these situations or these for the next few years, what you're going to be doing and who you're going to be working with, not really knowing how you're going to feel later, how that's going to affect the rest of your adult life. So that's also a whole layer, which is that, like, yeah, she was Norma Jeane, she created Marilyn Monroe, but even if she quit Marilyn, let's say by the time she was 40 or 36, she's done with movies, like, would she ever have been able to escape it anyway? Like, no, probably not. You know,
Not the way that the tabloids sort of
no,
you know,
Elizabeth Taylor was even
positioned her.
hounded, like, for
Yeah.
how big when she aged, when she gained weight, she was constantly talked about. So I would imagine it would be a lot like her, you know, like just being
Probably.
kind of, yeah, where, I mean, Elizabeth Taylor didn't give a fuck, but you know, someone like someone as sensitive and someone who cares as much as Marilyn did, I think that would, as it obviously did, affected her, and she had to cope with it. I think that also, like, taking medications, not just like, a lot of people are like, oh, she was depressed, she took so many medications. We have to understand that this industry was like nonstop, and she really was working from the time she was like 18 to basically 36, and to keep up with that momentum, to keep up with those amount of projects and having to be in places like that was just very common. So yeah, I think that a lot of the time biopics and even biographies, they just tend to, oh, well, she was just so sad, so she was just covering it up with pills, versus like she was just trying to get to, you know, get through the day, which is why a lot of people took medication and still do. But yeah.
I know you had mentioned there's some quotes that you wanted to read about her as a person, and I have some quotes that I want to read from sort of like academics and a little bit from Andrew Dominik. What do you think better serves her? To hear from the director and his perception of her and the film, or to hear from the people that knew her better first?
I think Andrew Dominik's is actually quite interesting because of just his trajectory of her. And so, I mean, that's interesting. I think we could just start with that.
Okay, so he did an interview with Vulture, talking about the film, and he says the film that definitely has a morality about it, but it swims in very ambiguous waters because I don't think it will be as cut and dried as people want to see it. There's something in it to offend everyone, and you know, when he was talking about his fascination with her, he said, "Why is Marilyn Monroe the great female icon of the 20th century? For men, she's an object of sexual desire that's desperately in need of rescue. For women, she embodies all the injustices visited upon the feminine, a sister, a Cinderella, consigned to live among the ashes. I want to tell the story of Norma Jeane as a central figure in a fairy tale, an orphan child lost in the woods of Hollywood, being consumed by that great icon of the 20th century." And he describes the film as being more accessible than his previous projects, and revealed that his script contained very little dialogue when he prepared to make it, and was like sort of thinking of it as a visual event. But he goes on to say, it tells the story of how a childhood trauma shapes an adult who's split between a public and private self. It's basically the story of every human being, but it's using a certain sense of association that we have with something very familiar just through media exposure. It takes all those things and turns the meanings of them inside out, according to how she feels, which is basically how we live. It's how we all operate in the world. It just seems to me to be very resonant. I think the project has got a lot of really exciting possibilities in terms of what can be done cinematically, and he commented on the critical reception of the film itself, saying, if you spent 70 years enjoying a fantasy of a person, then a movie comes along that says she was not complicit in your enjoyment, it puts you in an uncomfortable position for having enjoyed it. People don't want to be put in that position. And I think obviously he's
That was great. Yeah.
he's correct, and he talks about this thing about like the rescue impulse and the sort of pervasive cultural impulse to rescue her, like the damsel in distress all the time. He says that, or he explained that everyone feels that they know what's best for her, but no version of that can be universally agreed upon, and emphasized that Blonde is less concerned with documented reality and more with the meaning and mythology of Monroe, exploring the idea of the rescue fantasy that appears in biographies, critiques, and even in the reactions of audiences who dislike the film. And according to him, the desire to rescue often says more about the rescuer than Monroe herself. And I think we see that at least reflected in a lot of the men that she interacts with. I think in her romantic relationships, there's all some level of custodianship over her. In varying degrees, whether it's the boys who sort of are the first ones to kind of like take her out of the Maryland stuff and be like, you're Norma, and like give her that kind of freedom in that way. You know, Joe represents something very different. Arthur represents something very different, but they all sort of take pride in like ownership over her. And not that that's necessarily like a real version of rescue, but it is like a falsified kind of like male ego sense of rescue. And I think it's a fascinating thing to try to capture on camera in these relationships, given that like none of them get a huge amount of screen time.
Yeah, it's also interesting how like they put us as the audience in that same situation. Like, how well do we know her? Why do we want to, like, what are we trying to save her from? If, you know, but then also knowing that this was like almost 60 something years ago, and there's nothing that we can, it's just
I know. I mean, much throughout the course of the film, I'm kind of like having that impulse of like, I wish that like Norma could just like get away from all of this stuff that is tormenting her. And, you know, so I think even playing with it on screen in terms of the relationships that we see, and then funneling that down to the audience of like, I'm going to make you so uncomfortable watching it that you are also going to want to like rescue her from the situation that she's in.
You know what it reminds me of is like In Cold Blood. It's like, you know, it's like you do have, I don't know, just this like this fantastical sort of like at the core of it, you're like, why are you talking to him? Why do you feel sympathy for this man? Like, and you know the ending, you know how it will end, but you're still carried through the story of this person, the feeling of what it must be to be waiting, you know, to be on trial, to serve, you know. I was just kind of thinking about how, and that's also, can we call it creative nonfiction? Is it a work of fiction? Is Cold Blood completely all factual? I don't
know.
even
It's been a long
know.
time since I read it.
Yeah. I was just sort of thinking more of like, we know how it ends, but yet we still are hoping for some different outcome. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to what he was saying about like that rescue kind of instinct in
Yeah.
all of us, and sort of our need to place that upon her, even in situations where she didn't like even seem to need rescuing, but to then like sort of manifest it on screen and then like force feed it back to us is a very uncomfortable experience. And I'm glad that like he's intentionally like trying to do that. And that his
Mm-hmm.
quote about like, oh, we've got something to offend everybody was,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, like if that's how you sort of market the movie at the beginning, then all right, like I really don't have any qualms, because I can't be like, oh, I didn't see this coming. Right? It's
Yeah.
like you're trying to offend me, and mostly succeeded. But yeah, you said you had some quotes from people that knew her,
Oh,
and I think that would be some interesting context to add to our conversation.
okay. So this is one of the arguments that I kept hearing over and over again was just that she didn't seem like a grown woman, that she seemed, like a baby, like they just made her just seem, again, like not have a lot of agency. But there's just something to be said about why they would depict Marilyn like that. One of these is by George Barris, who is one of a friend, but also a photographer. He's one of the last people to shoot her in kind of a professional setting. Is what I particularly liked about Marilyn was that she didn't act like a movie star. She was down to earth. Although she was 28 then, she looked and acted like a teenager. Sure, she was beautiful and sexy, but there was always an almost childlike innocence about her. Billy Travilla, he did the famous 7-year itch white dress. He did the Gold LeMay dress. He's dressed costume designer. Said she was so childlike she could do anything and you would forgive as if you would forgive a 7-year-old. She was both a woman and a baby, and both men and women adored her. She was extremely bright and with the whims of a child. I think she wanted to love but could barely love herself. Again, someone who worked closely with her, multiple pictures. Constance Collier, this was Marilyn's first early acting coach. She is a beautiful child. I don't think she's an actress at all, not in any traditional sense. What she has, this flickering intelligence, could never surface on the stage. It can only be caught by the camera. I really pray, that she survives long enough to free the strange, lovely talent that's wandering through her like a jailed spirit. And he died in 1955 before he could see her go on to go into the actor studio, take on serious roles. And even him early on was that like, no, she's brilliant. Natalie Wood said this about Marilyn: when you look at Marilyn on screen, you don't want anything to happen to her. You really care that she should be all right. She should be happy.
Yeah, I see. We're just talking
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, exactly. And Anne Bancroft, she was her co-star in But Don't Bother to Knock, which is featured in the film as when she's like, the audition and like holding the razor blade to her throat. It's a very intense psychological thriller. And she said there was this one scene of one woman seeing another woman who was helpless and in pain. And she really was, Marilyn, helpless and in pain. It felt so real, I responded. I really reacted to her. She moved me to tears. She moved me so that tears came into my eyes. So this feeling of like, it just felt so like this person really was. Sydney Skolsky, who is a Hollywood columnist who also was really good friends of Marilyn, said, she was always seeking advice. She appeared kind, soft, and helpless. Almost everyone wanted to help her who knew her. Marilyn's supposed helplessness was her greatest gift. So yeah, just kind of these like, it's just sorry.
No. That's I'm glad you added that, and I want to talk about the sort of the childlike nature thing.
Yeah.
And the sort of the quality of her acting that the coach was talking about, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In that first scene where we see her like auditioning for the studio itself, she's like on a soundstage, right? She's getting into this, like she's doing these line readings with this guy, and she's like falling apart. And I think like where she's approaching it from versus like what the studio wants are obviously two very different things. And it's funny, she walks away, we get this very intense close up. She's crying. She's like incredibly like into the line reading. And then like we pull back further and it's like, okay, here's the people that read the line and the studio execs and maybe the director or something. And they're all like, that's the worst acting we've ever seen. Like, what the hell is that? Right. And so like what they wanted out of like a Hollywood starlet at the time is not to like actually convey maybe any actual real emotion. And then it's like you get the shot of her walking away and the director's like, well, she's got a nice ass and all right, get her a job kind of thing. So I find it sort of interesting that her acting coach is like, yeah, she's like too big in terms of like her skill to be ready for what the studio wants at this time. Like you can only capture it on camera because they're doing that line reading in person and they're all just like, well, this like woman's clearly hysterical. She's crying. Like, they don't know what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And in having gotten to watch some of her films to prepare for this, like she is a good actress. And I think that's kind of something that maybe gets lost in the mist, especially like all these years later. It's like, because yes, she was pretty, she was blonde, she had all this stuff going for her in terms of like being an icon and not necessarily having to be a good actress, but also to like be a very good actress in that she's incredibly funny in Some Like It Hot. And like you said, I mean, that's like, it's a really good movie. So I think it's sort of like she's in a situation where it benefits her because like everything else is good. And she's working with she's opposite some very good actors that bring the best out of her. So she is like this very skilled on-screen presence, never really given like the full amount of credit for it. And I want to go back to the childlike thing because there is a lot of focus in the movie on, abortion, yes, but that's sort of more of like a thrust upon us style choice. But just the notion of that she's an unwanted child when we meet her in the story. And then she's dealing with a lot of these unplanned pregnancies and like sort of why she's so connected to it and what it means for her as a person to be an unwanted child. And so like listening to you explain like some of the sort of childlike nature of her and from people that are close to her and this kind of like innocence is maybe coming from this place of, feeling unwanted and sort of like I think what's it called, arrested development, where you kind of like get stuck in the age of your trauma. And I think the thing that makes it probably really unpalatable in the film is each additional time she calls one of her lovers daddy, it's like it gets worse each time. And I'm just like, I do not want to hear this anymore. And so there is this like looming ghostly father figure that's kind of in the background and writing letters. And like, is there any truth to any of that like that was going on with her father?
No. Yeah, that's all fictional. One of the things I did not like was the her talking to her fetus. It's not in the book. It's a complete stylistic choice that they took in the film that does have a very pro-life heavy hand that when I first watched it, I was like, what is this? I do not like this. Like, I mean, like, again, like this actress struggled with endometriosis. She wanted to have children. She had miscarriage after miscarriage. There's no, there's no record of her having an abortion. So that's upsetting. And then you have her kind of talking to this far along fetus, which I understand is her imagining the baby inside of her, but to have that imagery was just, but also the daddy. I know that's in the book. It's in the 2001 mini TV series adaptation. I know that she did call, I think, Arthur Miller daddy. But it's like every single person she's with. And it's just, it's the daddy issues is very heavy handed, but there is truth in her own words and in multiple biographies is that there was a picture of a man who is been confirmed that it was her dad that her mother had that looked like Clark Gable. So she kind of grew up thinking, oh, Clark Gable's my dad, and having this sort of like just, but never really knowing who her father was. So I think they included the piano, they included the picture of her father on the wall, her mother being part of that industry, to be like, could just in her mind, what she was thinking is that, like, is my dad a famous man? Is he, does he live in a house? Are we going to be, just are we going to be saved? Are we going to be taken away? Am I finally going to meet my father? And I mean, I can actually identify, because my father left my mom and I when I was 2, and I didn't meet him until I was 12. And so there was a huge part of my life where, it does pop up a lot of like, who is he? Is he around? Are there photos of him? When will I meet him? How much of am I in him? And I don't think that she ever, because never knowing, I think, again, we don't know, but we can imagine that had a huge impact on her. And yeah, I didn't like how they the daddy issue is definitely heavy handed, but I mean, she didn't have a father. Her mom was put in a mental institution at a very young age. She was in and out of foster homes, like several foster homes, which the film only goes over one. So it makes sense that this person would, in a lot of ways, maybe revert, like you said, Arrested Development. I think that there are multiple paths you can take. It's like some people go the other way. They're just like super strong. They set their boundaries and they excel, and that's great. But a lot of people tend to be pretty broken and don't know who to trust, what real love is. How to love themselves.
My dad passed when I was 7, and so not knowing him and sort of like having a lot of that same wonder of like, am I like this person? Like, what would he think of me as an adult? And having that disconnect, I mean, it surely leaves a sort of void in your life. So I can totally understand that. And I think hearing at least what Dominik said about this film, he didn't accidentally sort of have her call everybody daddy. I think he wielded it as a tool to make us like increasingly uncomfortable. And I mean, it's funny that like she thought Clark Gable might have been her dad, and then her last movie is opposite Clark Gable. Like, what?
And his last movie too. So wild.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know. It's just like full circle for her. Yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit sort of just briefly there about sort of the things we want more of and less of in the film, but we're going to do it officially with more or less.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Less daddy, obviously. Is there anything else that comes to your mind where you're thinking of this movie and you're like, yeah, we could have like had a successful film with less of that?
I think because the daddy issue, I don't say daddy issues, but it's heavy-handed. I would say that I maybe would have removed the Gemini. I understand that this is in the book. I mean, gosh, so much of this is just like, it's beholden to the book. It's an adaptation. It's trying to be a faithful adaptation. But I mean, the use of the imagery going inside of Marilyn, I think her speaking to the fetuses, and then maybe even, like I said, the threesome with I loved that sex scene. I really loved them allowing those characters allow Marilyn to have, control over her own sexuality, her own pleasure, her own desires. And I love that. But it's also like, could we not have included people that maybe was actually in her orbit a little bit? Like, I was thinking of Marlon Brando as someone who would have been in that time period. They dated, they were friends. Like, why couldn't someone who has said pretty brilliant things about her as a person after her death too, been in there. But again, that's, I feel like I keep going back to like what I think that the book could have been differently, but in the film itself, it's like, I really do love everything that's in it, aside from the overuse of Daddy, the way that she just falls in miscarriages. I just think that that's kind of, I just think there's other
Fair.
ways that, yeah, I mean, it's just like she
She,
falls and
tripped
then it's like,
over a rock.
yeah, and then there's like so much blood and it feels a little, yeah, I mean, when I saw it the first time, I still think even after watching it a few times, I do think that the use of just, I'm not going to call it pro-life, but just, we do get that she wanted to be a mother. We could have seen that in other ways, like her handling children would have been maybe a more interesting thing, and in a juxtaposition too, right? Because it's just this horror film, it's a nightmare, and then she's like holding these babies or interacting with children, which she did quite often, and they loved her. And so to see how there is the childlike quality could have been displayed in a way of her reacting with children versus calling people daddy or maybe being naked as much as she was or something. But that's just, again, I keep going back to maybe ways that the book could have explored that. And I think that he was just trying to stay faithful to the novel. So
It's fair.
yeah.
I will say, Xavier Samuel, who plays Cass Chaplin, was giving off a little bit too much Patrick Bateman during some of those scenes. So I'm like, okay, maybe dial that back a little. Look less evil maybe right now. And that would be fine. I think ultimately, though, I would say maybe less speculum cam. We don't need to see that.
Yeah.
I like that's it's unnecessary. I like okay, if you want to go through the trouble of like making the prosthetics and like doing the whole thing with the camera, like once was enough. You don't have to go and then revisit it a second time.
Exactly. Cut it out. It didn't need to be like
It's already not tasteful what we're doing here. So do we then need to like make it even less tasteful by sort of like physically inserting us as the audience like inside her body against her will? Like okay, dial it back, Andrew Dominik.
That's 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I did not love that.
You want to make us uncomfortable, you've succeeded without that. Okay.
Yeah.
Buddy, chill.
Yeah.
And then I think more I would have liked to see Norma more prior to being Marilyn, because like she was discovered working at like, I don't want to say like an aerospace factory, but she was like working on building airplanes.
Yeah, basically that's what she was doing for the war. Yeah.
So I would have liked to see more of like the Norma before she becomes Marilyn, so that way like we do sort of like remove that element of her and really like see her as who she is before like she starts getting photographed and sexualized and all that stuff. So yeah, I would have liked to see that. We don't see anything about the first husband either, so it's like we don't see what it's like to be married at 16 years old to a man who I assume was older than 21.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as we're talking about this, it does kind of lean more into, again, like things that a biopic would hit on, but I do completely agree. I think her transforming into Marilyn, even though it has been done in a lot of previous like movies, biopics, TV series, it would have been nice here. I mean, it really is just kind of like those covers that flash and you're like, oh, okay, now she's famous because she was on a few magazines, not really showing that she was like this pinup for the war, and that there was like years of her just kind of like modeling and doing very small parts before, even though there was great momentum, it still does kind of feel like it's like she's a kid and then she did a few magazine covers and now she's Marilyn. And I do agree that it would have been, definitely more interesting.
Well, because I just think that sort of like a central thesis of the film is that this is like a very bright, capable young woman who makes a lot of smart decisions coupled with probably some bad ones. But every time you show us that she is smart, you immediately like undercut it in a way that like the movie is designed to do, it is designed to like show how everybody around her is like not giving her credit for that.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see like just a little bit more of like before that started, where it's like we could tell that she is bright and has agency and all of these things, and maybe a little bit of the like the wheels turning on like designing Marilyn and separating that from Norma. I would have found that interesting. I don't think the movie needs to go to be 3.5 hours long in order to satisfy that. But yeah, I would have found it interesting at least.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go to Critics Corner. We'll hear some good, some bad, some in between. The board's not as bad as I thought. We have a 50 overall at the top, but there's a lot more green on the field than I initially anticipated. So we're going to start at the bottom with Screen Daily. This is Fionnuala Halligan. They gave it a 40 out of 100, saying technically skilled, well acted, and fatally overlong. It's hard not to see Blonde as a chronicle of exploitation and abuse, which merely carries on the tradition, a sensation reinforced by Ana de Armas' poignant performance as Marilyn. It seems to be a fairly consistent takeaway in like the critics' eyes. Do you think this would have been better as like a miniseries, like 3 hour long or maybe like 4 hour long episodes? Do 45 minutes
with all the same people? Are we getting all the same people?
Yeah, just exactly the same, but like you flesh it out to a full like 3.5 hours and just more digestible.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're later going to talk about gateway films, but if you think of, I mean, there are other films that, you know, they're challenging for one sitting. And that's actually a really good point. Is like, if this was a 3-part or 3 episode, even 2 episode Netflix, like, would that have been more palatable and received? Probably, because the number one thing I hear from everyone is that it was just too long. Is that you're sitting through the discomfort for too long. And, you know, I know that he didn't want to cut anything. And so that's his choice. And he made the movie he wanted to make. But yeah, in terms of, because I hear that so often, I'm like, well, that would have kind of solved that, right? It wouldn't feel as long. It wouldn't put the viewer through as much agony for as long. So, I think that's, I mean, I love that it's a movie. But if we're going to sit here and just pretend we could chop it up and make it a little more like, yes, I think that would have helped a lot in terms of the reception of it. Yeah. Because it's pretty painful.
And I think that it also balances, like, you could focus to where it's like, hey, we want to end the first hour with only like X amount of stuff that is going to be stomach turning. And then like you get your little break. Like the Pit does each week, sort of, where it's like, hey, you know, hey, we're going to start with a little bit of, hey, there's some humor. This dude's drinking his boba. And then, gunshot wound to the face.
And then something else, and then we got another, and then it's just like kind of, you know, yeah. Oh God, The Pit is so, I don't know how everyone can watch it as a comfort show. It's so hard for me.
I don't know how that happened, but like it has become the tradition. But I watched that with Shrinking. So it's like we save that. So I get a little Shrinking for the comedy and the heartwarming, and then The Pit for the intensity.
Yes.
Okay, so let's climb the ladder. We've got The Guardian, The Hollywood Reporter, and Empire all clocking in with 60 out of 100. Who do you want to hear from?
The Guardian? I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, that's fine. Leslie Felperin. Okay, this is a portrait of Monroe that accentuates her suffering and anguish, canonizing her into a feminist saint who died for our scopophilic sins, if I read that right, that we might feast on her beauty and talent. Maybe it's not an opera, but a kind of religious ritual for the modern age, visiting the stations of the crosses Monroe bore, the passion of Marilyn.
Okay.
I mean, she only gave it a 60, but I mean, it seems like a fairly like kind take on it. Okay. Let's see. We got 65. We'll jump over that one. We'll go to the playlist, 75. Jack King says, "This is a nasty, queasy, unforgiving piece of work. It is utterly devoid of hope. It's as shocking as any slasher, as horrifying as any grisly bit of wartime realism. Yet there's something so compelling about the director's broader argument, and it's rendered with rare visual deftness, with some big swing moments that land terrifically."
Yeah,
Queasy and unforgiving.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, it like doesn't sound
Hopeful,
positive,
I
but he
don't know
clearly.
Yeah. It is interesting. Again, like, I don't know how much hope we have for her story. It's just like when we know her life and how it ends, I'm really curious how we're supposed to inject so much happiness and hope to
Yeah.
make people feel better about, like, again, still enjoying her work and still being a fan. Sometimes I'm embarrassed by it because it does kind of at times feel exploitative that I have like all these books and that I share photos of her and that I look at her so much, because it's like, why do I do that? You know, why do we do that? But
She's fascinating.
yeah, exactly. But it's also extremely, it's just interesting to expect hope from this story. I just don't know how that could occur. But
Yeah, unfortunately, she dies via barbiturate
yeah,
overdose at 36 years old. So
in an
it's
empty
like,
home, divorced,
yeah.
with no career. Yeah, that's the truth of it. Unfortunately, that is.
Mhm.
And people
And
don't
so,
realize that, like, she'd been dropped. Like, she had no, like you know what I mean?
it was a year after her last film came out, and yeah, it was like her and her poor dog.
Yeah, she was in the middle of shooting with, Dean Martin, Something's Gotta Give. And that turned out to be weeks and weeks of just her showing up late, not showing up at all, to the point where they just fired her and dropped her contract. So, yeah, when she passed, she was not represented. She did not have a career. She had no films in the works. It was like, so that just, I'm like, I don't, yeah. And she did just buy her home, but she had like no furniture. So it was empty. It's just a very, like, not a great picture.
Yeah, the reality of it is, like, the truth is, it's sad, unfortunately. And yeah, it's hard to be hopeful, I think, knowing the end result is like never going to be a positive, and sort of like it feels disingenuous to be like, let's go back and put a positive spin on all of this, because it's like, yeah, her career did have some big highs, but I think looking at it comprehensively from start to finish, you don't have any choice but to be like, yeah, I think the net takeaway is probably negative given the ending.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's at least read some nice reviews. We've got 2 80s on the board with The Telegraph and Variety, so you can choose who you want to hear from.
We can do Variety. Yeah.
Oh, Owen Gleiberman, the guy who I don't think I've ever read a positive review on this show of anything ever.
Okay.
At least definitely not this positive. I'd have to go back and check. But good old Glebe says, with a passion that's inquisitive, nearly meditative, and often powerful, Blonde focuses on the mystery we now think of when we think of Marilyn Monroe. Who was she exactly, as a personality and as a human being? Why did her life descend into a tragedy that seems, in hindsight, as inevitable as it is haunting?
I love that, because not only was I thinking of Lynch while watching this, I was also thinking of Terrence Malick in the way it is meditative, poetic, and at times there's not a lot of, dialogue. So yeah, that's really good. And you said he doesn't usually give good reviews. Wow.
Well, not if anything I talk about on this show.
Yeah.
He's usually here to be a Debbie Downer.
Man. Yeah,
nice to see
really
him in the green.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Lynch. He came up a couple times in reading about this, and his character design for Twin Peaks, and some of the similarities between how he crafted that character for Fire Walk with Me, and sort of like the ethereal nature of the way he works as well. So yeah, not entirely foreign concept.
Yeah, I think he was quoted when he was talking about Mulholland Drive and Hollywood actresses, and he was like, "Oh, it's always about Marilyn Monroe. It always goes back to Marilyn Monroe as like a big sort of inspiration." So yeah, people mentioned a lot Fire Walk with Me in terms of films that this kind of feels like. I would even argue kind of like, Mulholland Drive, but even Lost Highway a little bit in terms of just the nightmare quality and not quite knowing the character and what is motivating her. But yeah.
All right, well, let's close it out. We've got a 90 on the board. This is from Vulture, same publication that talked to Andrew Dominik about this. Bill Jabiri says, Blonde is beautiful, mesmerizing, and at times deeply moving. But it's also alienating, again, by design, constantly turning the camera on the viewer, sometimes with Marilyn directly addressing it. That's going to be a tough sell, especially for a film that's so non-linear and elliptical.
Yeah.
It's all true.
Yeah, I think that was something I heard too, was the argument of just it was all over the place, the storyline, the term, the events. And I mean, I felt like it was pretty cohesive, but I'm also used to watching films like Mulholland Drive that kind of cut to different ratios, different maybe color, or just different moments. That is this a dream? Is this real life? And so again, I just like challenging films like that. But that is definitely, he was right in that prediction of it being tough for people.
It's an even tougher sell when you send it to streaming.
Yeah, I know.
And you hope that Netflix handles it well.
I know. I really wish I could have seen this in theaters, but
yeah, in hindsight, had I sat in theaters for it, I probably would have been like, yeah, I can tell it's a little long because I got to use the bathroom. But
okay, that's true.
At the same time, like, I would have also probably appreciated what it's doing cinematically more, because even at home, I've got a nice big ass TV, and I'm like, yeah, visually it does a lot of very interesting stuff with its presentation. So I'm glad that it shows sort of like a very artistic, dreamlike experience for it all. Even though it's like kind of a nightmare, like it does sort of feel like it's using the right sort of tools in the toolbox to help us experience that nightmare. Because yes, it is a very unpleasant watch a lot of the time. But speaking of unpleasant watches, we've got to come up with some recommendations here. So I want to know what your gateway drug movie is for Blonde.
Okay, so I know we've already talked about David Lynch films, so I'm not going to choose that one. I'm actually going to choose Maria the 2024 film with Angelina Jolie by Pablo.
That's a good one.
Yes, yeah. He also did Jackie, and it also has both of those films have the same JFK actor playing JFK. But I mean, I don't know if did you watch Maria? I'm not sure if you
did. Yes.
Oh, okay. So then,
it's about the opera singer that is kind of
exactly.
like, she's losing her voice or her ability to like sing at the level that she is accustomed to.
Exactly. In no ways is she like an old, decrepit woman, but she's reaching a point in her career that most people don't sing anymore, and she is in terms of like facing that, but also dealing with a prescription medication addiction, and ultimately loses that battle at the end of the film. And it also goes into different film types, from 35 to 16 millimeter. There is changes in color and tone. It feels also very dreamlike. I think it's a non-conventional biopic as well, kind of just a more experimental study on her. But I mean, Angelina Jolie's performance is amazing. Her singing is amazing. And again, if you can handle, if you like this, if this is something that I think that you might also like Blonde, or you could at least get you prepared for that.
Yeah. And I mean, like, both, I think, not equally famous, but like women that are in like strong positions of fame, the expectations
Yes.
that are placed upon them as a result of that, sort of coming to the end of their careers at a age where, they're young women still.
Yes.
It has a lot of those hallmarks, and also kind of like the nightmarish trap of like wanting to be this person, but also realizing like the cost of being that person. Yeah, it's a good pick.
Yeah. What
I
about you?
think I was like, I don't know the Marilyn sort of other stuff enough to recommend any of that. And so the one I chose was more of like the tonal partner is The Wrestler, Aronofsky's movie.
Yes, that is so good.
Fictional biopic. It's a tragedy. It's like the wrestler is also like he's presenting this in-ring character like I'm gonna die doing the thing that I love to do. And it's very like just stripped down and like kind of like painful to watch for a lot of it as well. I think it has a little bit more moments of like, hey, there's hope here and things might actually like turn out okay for this guy.
Yeah.
And not so much.
Gosh, and just him knowing that when he goes back in the ring, that won't like that it could be the end of. I mean, gosh, that is such a good one, and I find it interesting that you brought in wrestling or even the ring because in a 2000 interview, Oates was kind of talking. I mean, she was talking about writing this book and how it kind of feels like Marilyn is in the ring a little bit, right? She's having to survive and kind of take the punches in order to I don't know how she said it, but it was just very interesting and kind of this of like we do you it's like the wrestler, it's like he's choosing to step into the ring again even though he knows that there could be these consequences, and I think that's God, and the wrestler's just so good. I thought a lot of Aronofsky actually, and just kind of his characters and again being victims but also being accomplices in their lives and their own destruction, which is just so hard to watch, right? Like a film like Wrestler Requiem for a Dream, you're like, no, don't, you could just not do that. It's like, but these people that's a good.
Yeah, I mean, it does speak to it like a certain level of the human condition to be like nobody is entirely like the victims or the driver of all of their own decisions. And it's like, you kind of don't know. You hope for the best, that like you can make the decisions that best impact you, and a lot of our decision making behaviors are governed by things like our childhood trauma, and like I think that brings into this notion of like free will. Like we're all constantly grappling with the idea of like, do we have, like, even if we're not like constantly asking ourselves like, do I have free will, like our lives are sort of this wrestling match with, do I have free will, and if I do, like how much of it can I use to like do the things that I want to do, and then like how much of my decision making is governed by all of these patterns and habits that have existed before this moment came. Because is my next decision going to be governed by my past, or can I actually execute free will to do something different? And I think that's a very sort of like human element at the center of all these stories.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, I want to give you a chance first before you peddle your wares. I want is there anything that sorry, I need to bring some levity in. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about the movie specifically, or about Marilyn specifically, that we didn't get a chance to touch on?
No, I mean, I think that I pretty much covered.
Yeah, we talked about a lot.
We talked about a lot. I think we covered everything.
Okay. And if not, there's 1,000 books and 100 movies on Marilyn for you to all, wet your beaks on if you're still interested. Michelle, this has been great. I'm glad we, took a chance on this, because I just was like, well, maybe you'd be interested in doing this. And timing wise, it just happened to work out that the 100th anniversary birthday is coming up. And so we squeezed it onto the calendar, and it's my first time doing something like this, and sort of like talking about a movie that is maybe of this quality level on the show. So it was both an interesting and fun exercise. The movie's not so much fun, but it is challenging, and so I want to give you the opportunity to like tell the listeners where they can find you and talk movies with you if they're so inclined.
Well, I'm not on X, but I am on Letterboxd as the Daily Niche, and I am on Instagram, and I will be hopefully in the next month or two be talking about the film The Runaways with In Film We Trust. So that'll be cool. But yeah, find me on Letterboxd. I watch a lot of stuff, and I want to know what you're watching. So, but yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming back, and for inquiring minds, if you're in the Los Angeles area, the Academy Museum is opening up its Marilyn Monroe exhibit to honor her, and I believe it's opening on the 1st.
It is opening. I'm going to be there. I'm going on Monday.
You're on
with my
mom.
Wow,
okay.
Yeah, she's flying in from Texas, so we're going to go to her grave. We're going to do everything on. It's going to be crazy.
Wow.
I don't know how but we are.
That's a big day, but
I know.
Yeah.
No.
That's very, very cool. So yeah, I don't know how long the exhibit is open, but I
till
saw
February of next year.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so a long time.
Very nice.
And there's like scripts, costumes. It looks amazing. So I definitely recommend. And again, if you want to wait a little bit until the craziness dies down of June, the month of June is probably going to be insane, then just know it's going to be throughout the rest of the year. So you have time.
Yeah, so for all the people that don't go on opening day on the 1st, you listen to this episode, and then maybe you're like, hey, I really want to go see that exhibit.
Exactly.
The Academy Museum is cool, though, and if the emphasis is put on it in the way that it's like a singular focus, like they did with the Jaws exhibit, I think it's going to be really cool. And I will have to venture my ass back out over there to the sort of west side. Yeah, so check it out. All right, well, thanks for hanging out. A big thanks to Michelle for coming back on the show and talking to me about what is a very challenging film. This is not one that is sort of casually dismissed or passively disliked. This movie is loathed, and I am prepared to catch some blowback for it. If you are looking to be the provider of some of that blowback, you can email me at badmovieswelove@theshice.com, or you can fill out the anonymous listener survey, and either way, I will read both. The links actually for both of those are up in the show notes, and also in the show notes, you can find links to Michelle's Instagram and her Letterboxd account, The Daily Niche, but please direct your vitriol at me. And if you're really angry and you want to hate listen to all of the Shice Podcast Network, which includes the Shice Podcast, Kunked, X-Friends, Hers, His, and Ours, you can do so by clicking the link in the show notes and following the Yellow Brick Road. While you're in Oz, you can become a contributor of Bad Movies We Love by clicking where it says support the show in the show notes, and you can leave a one-time donation. You can become a sustaining member for just $5 a month, and you'll get a welcome gift. You'll get access to the Discord server, and you'll get all of the exclusive episodes just like our Frontlines members. Kristen, Sharon, Ben, Sean, Josie, Donnie, Nathan, and Melissa. Thank you all for the continued support. And of course, thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to not just this episode, but the entire show. You've got a lot of choices, so thanks for trusting me with your time. Be good, do good, have fun, watch movies.